I thought I had control. I thought I knew exactly how far I could push things. I made the rules. I picked the players. And for a while, I played the game well. 13 men. 1 week. No faces I'd remember, no names I'd say twice. Just moments, strangers touching my body while I pretended to sleep, their hands roaming, their breath hot against my skin. Every time, I told myself it was just another night. Another thrill. But the last one was different. I should have listened to that feeling. That creeping unease. That tiny voice in my head whispering, "This one isn't safe." But I didn't. I smiled. I played along. And when I closed my eyes that night, pretending to sleep, I knew before he even touched me, something was wrong. And by then, it was too late. I held my breath. My body still. My heart hammering so hard I thought he might hear it. I'd done this before. I knew the routine. But this time, I wasn't sure what was coming. Before we go any further, I need to say this: if you're easily disturbed, stop now. This story is not for you. It's raw. It's messy. It's real. It's about infidelity, risk, and consequences. And if that makes you uncomfortable, I won't blame you for clicking away. But if you stay, just know, some doors should never be opened. And once they are, there's no going back. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be doing this, I would have laughed in their face. But life has a way of shifting under your feet, cracking at the edges until, before you know it, you're falling, and you don't even try to grab onto anything anymore. I guess that's where it started, falling. At first, slowly. Then all at once. I used to be normal. Or at least, I think I was. I had a job, friends, a long-term boyfriend. We had the kind of relationship that looked solid on the outside. Nehemiah was dependable, predictable, the kind of man my mother would say was husband material. And maybe in the beginning, I believed that too. We built a life together, a quiet, steady existence. Dinners at the same restaurants. TV shows we never finished. Birthdays that became afterthoughts. And slowly, without either of us realizing it, we drifted. It wasn't some explosive fight. There was no screaming, no betrayal, no dramatic moment that ended things. It was much worse than that. It was a slow erosion, an emotional vacancy that stretched between us like a yawning void. We went from passionate to polite, from lovers to something closer to business partners sharing a lease. I told myself it was just a phase, but deep down, I knew. The man who once traced circles on my skin while we lay tangled in the sheets now barely touched me at all. And I stopped wanting him to. I should have left. I should have had the guts to say, "This isn't working," pack my things, and walk away. But I didn't. I stayed. Maybe out of habit. Maybe out of fear. Maybe because I wanted to see how far I could stretch the limits of my own self-control before something inside me snapped. That's when the thoughts started. Little whispers in the back of my mind. I wondered what it would feel like to be wanted again. Not in a routine, obligatory way, but in a raw, desperate, uncontrollable way. The kind that makes your pulse race. The kind that makes you feel alive. But wanting wasn't enough. I needed something else, something more dangerous, something thrilling. Something I could dangle in front of me like a lit match, knowing full well I was standing in gasoline. So I started looking. It wasn't hard. The internet is filled with dark corners, places where people look for things they can't say out loud. Places where you can be anything, ask for anything. And I did. I crafted the words carefully, painting a picture of what I wanted, someone who could follow instructions. Someone who wouldn't ask questions. Someone who would do as they were told while I lay there, silent, still, completely at their mercy. That's the thing about mercy, though. It's only real if you don't take it for granted. The responses came fast. Men, eager, hungry, some nervous, some experienced. I sifted through them like resumes, choosing carefully, making sure they understood the rules. I wasn't reckless, I was in control. Every detail was planned, down to the minute. We'd meet first, somewhere public. I'd get a sense of them, decide if they were worth trusting. If they passed the test, I'd take the next step. A hotel key. A whispered instruction. A recorded consent video. I made sure they knew, this was a game, my game. And they would play it exactly as I dictated, or not at all. The first time, I was nervous. I took the sleeping pill, just half of one, enough to make me drowsy but not enough to actually knock me out. Then I lay there, my body loose, my breathing slow, waiting in the dark. The door opened, soft footsteps, the shift of air as someone stood over me. I could feel him hesitate, feel the weight of his uncertainty. And then, his hands. They were warm. Careful at first. Exploring. Testing. I should have been scared. But I wasn't. I was excited. The tension, the waiting, the not knowing, it was intoxicating. I felt powerful in a way I hadn't in years, not because I was being taken, but because I had orchestrated every second of it. Because in the end, I was still the one in control. The next night, it was easier. And the next. And the next. 13 men in 1 week. Different hands, different mouths, different bodies pressing against mine in the dark. Some of them gentle. Some rougher. Some who whispered my name like a prayer. Others who barely spoke at all. But none of them mattered. None of them lingered. It was like being swallowed by something bigger than myself, a world where rules didn't apply, where I could be touched, used, wanted, and still walk away without a scratch. Or so I thought. But then, there was the last one. The stranger. The mistake. The night that made me realize I had been playing with fire, and I was about to get burned. His name was Jordan Waller. And I should have never let him in. If you're still with me, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like this. Trust me, there's so much more to uncover. I lost track of the days. One bled into the next, a blur of hotel rooms, whispered agreements, the cold press of keys against my palm. Each night had its own rhythm, its own anticipation, its own set of rules, rules that I made, rules that I bent when it suited me. I told myself that as long as I was in control, I was safe. And for a while, that was true. Rodrigo Browning was the first. Tall, smooth voice, confident in a way that wasn't overbearing. He had a way of looking at me that made it clear he liked the idea of what I was offering, but he wasn't entirely sure he believed I was serious. We met at a bar first, as always. I watched the way he moved, how he carried himself. He was cautious. Not overly eager, not shy either, just a man calculating risk. I liked that. It meant he would follow the rules. We had drinks, exchanged meaningless conversation, danced around what we both knew was coming. When I finally slid the key card across the table, his fingers hovered over it for just a second too long, as if hesitating. But he took it. They always took it. And when he arrived at my hotel room later that night, I was already in bed, eyes closed, waiting. That night, I remember everything. The weight of his presence in the room. The subtle creak of the mattress as he sat down beside me. The way his fingers hesitated just above my skin, as if silently asking permission from someone who couldn't answer. He followed the script. He did what I told him he could do. And when it was over, he left without a word, like all the others. The next night, it was Reesmay. He was different. Less patient. More eager. I could sense at the moment I met him, something simmering beneath the surface, something restless. He liked the idea of power, of being given access to something forbidden. But he also liked to test boundaries. I watched him carefully that night, made sure he understood I was the one setting the pace, the one dictating how far it would go. When I handed him the key, I held on to it just a second longer, a silent warning. He got the message. That night, he behaved. Mostly. It didn't take long for the game to pick up momentum. Deacon Gardner came next. Then Marley Perez. Each one added a new layer, a new twist, a new pulse of adrenaline. Some were hesitant, their touches careful, almost reverent. Others were rougher, hungrier, treating my body like something to be claimed. But through it all, I never let myself forget, I was the one in control. I had chosen them. I had orchestrated every second. But then there was Onyx Shelton. And Onyx, he was reckless. He was confident. Too confident. When I met him, he didn't ask the same questions the others did. He didn't hesitate, didn't second guess. He liked the game immediately. But there was something else, something about the way he talked, the way he carried himself. He liked being the one in charge. And that made him dangerous. I should have walked away. But I didn't. I let him in. I gave him the key. And when he showed up at my hotel room later that night, he wasn't alone. I remember the sound of the door unlocking. The way the air shifted as someone stepped inside. I waited, like I always did, breathing slow, heart steady. But then, something changed. A second set of footsteps. Too heavy, too unfamiliar. A voice, deep, unfamiliar, murmuring something I couldn't quite catch. And then, a hand, not where it was supposed to be. Not the way I had planned it. I opened my eyes before I could stop myself. And there they were, Onyx, standing at the foot of the bed, and beside him, a stranger. I sat up immediately, my body rigid, my mind scrambling to process what was happening. I saw the flicker of amusement in Onyx's eyes, the way he tilted his head, almost like he was daring me to call him out. The other man, he didn't say a word. Just stood there, waiting. Who is he? I asked, my voice steady even though my pulse was racing. Onyx just smirked. Relax, he said. He's cool. He wasn't cool. He wasn't supposed to be there. And in that moment, I realized something, I had lost control. I had let someone slip through the cracks, someone who didn't follow the rules. And now, I had a choice. Keep playing. Or end the game. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked past them like it was nothing. Didn't run. Didn't panic. Just walked. And maybe that's what threw them off, maybe that's what made Onyx realize he had pushed too far. Because he didn't stop me. Neither of them did. I left them standing there, in the middle of that room, with nothing but silence between us. That night should have been a wake-up call. I should have seen it for what it was, a warning, a flashing red light telling me to stop before it was too late. But I didn't. I told myself it was a fluke, an isolated incident, something that wouldn't happen again. And maybe it wouldn't have, if I had stopped there. But I didn't stop. I kept going. And the next night, I met Jordan Waller. The first time I saw him, I knew something was off. It wasn't anything obvious, not at first. He wasn't the loudest in the room, wasn't the most confident, wasn't the kind that stood out. But there was something in the way he looked at me, something too still, too unreadable. It wasn't attraction. It wasn't excitement. It was something else. Something I couldn't name. His name was Jordan Waller. And I should have never let him in. He wasn't supposed to be there. That much I know for sure. He wasn't part of the plan, wasn't part of the careful selection process I followed every single time. I don't know where he came from, who invited him. Maybe someone brought him in as an afterthought. Maybe he was just passing through. Or maybe, he had been watching from the start, waiting for the right moment to step forward. I met him at a bar. The same place I always picked for first meetings. He sat across from me, barely touching his drink, watching me with eyes that didn't blink enough. The others were different. They asked questions, wanted details, wanted to be sure. But Jordan? He didn't ask anything. Not where I was from, not why I did this, not even the basics. He just listened. Nodded at the right moments. Smiled without showing his teeth. And when I laid out the rules, he didn't agree, didn't push back. He just sat there, silent. Do you understand? I asked, keeping my voice steady. His head tilted, just a fraction. Then, after a beat, yeah. That was it. No hesitation. No curiosity. Just an answer that gave me nothing. I should have left right then. I should have listened to the voice in my head that told me this was wrong, that told me I didn't know enough about him, that this wasn't safe. But I was already too far gone. I wanted the rush. I wanted the feeling of getting away with something. And more than anything, I wanted to prove to myself that I was still in control. So I gave him the key. The hotel room was cold when I got back. I liked it that way. I always kept the air on full blast, let the chill seep into my bones so that when they touched me, it felt different. More noticeable. More real. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time that night, longer than usual. I don't know why. Maybe I was looking for something in my own reflection. Maybe I was trying to convince myself this was just another night, just another stranger. I took the pill, just like always. Let my body relax, let my breathing slow, let my limbs go heavy. But I wasn't asleep. Not really. I never was. I stayed somewhere in the in-between, just aware enough to know when the door opened, when the air shifted, when the presence in the room changed. This time, it felt different. I heard him before I felt him. A slow, steady breath. Not rushed. Not eager. Just there. Like he was waiting for something. I kept my breathing even, forced my muscles to stay loose. And then, his voice. Low. Almost amused. I know you're awake. It took everything in me not to react. Not to open my eyes. Not to move. My heartbeat was too loud, thudding against my ribs, betraying me. I could feel him standing over me, close enough that I could hear the shift of fabric as he moved. He wasn't touching me. Not yet. He was just watching. I've never felt small before. Not in any of this. I made sure of that. I controlled the rules, the limits, the outcomes. But in that moment, I wasn't in control anymore. I was just a body in a bed, at the mercy of someone I didn't know, someone I didn't choose. Then, he did something none of the others had done. He leaned down, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath against my ear. And he whispered something I couldn't quite make out. Something low, something slow, something meant just for me. He didn't follow the rules. He didn't wait his turn. He didn't move the way they were supposed to. He just stood there, too close, too patient, like he was waiting for me to react. And when I didn't, he laughed. That was when I knew. This wasn't a game to him. He wasn't here for the thrill of playing along. He was here for something else. Something I didn't understand yet. Something I wasn't ready for. I lay there, every nerve in my body on fire, every instinct screaming at me to move. But I didn't. I stayed still. Because that was my only chance. If he thought I was asleep, if he believed I wasn't aware, maybe, just maybe, I could get through this. But the problem was, Jordan Waller wasn't like the others. He wasn't following my rules. He was playing by his own. I knew I was in trouble the second he spoke. Not because of the words themselves, but because of how he said them. Too calm. Too certain. Like he had been waiting for this moment, like he had rehearsed it 1,000 times in his head. I know you're awake. I felt his breath, hot against my ear, the space between us disappearing. I didn't flinch. I didn't react. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, to fight, to do anything, but I stayed still. Because that was my only chance. If I moved, if I reacted, I was giving him something. And I couldn't afford to give him anything. Then, he chuckled. Not loud. Not forced. Just a small, amused sound, like he had figured out a joke no one else in the room knew. You thought you were in control, he murmured. But not this time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the covers off and bolt for the door, but I knew better. He was waiting for that. Expecting it. He wanted to see the fear, to hear it in my voice, to feel it ripple off my skin like heat. But I wouldn't give him that. I couldn't. Instead of acting, he just waited. He didn't touch me. He didn't move. He just stood there, too close, his presence heavy, his breath steady. He wasn't in a rush. He wasn't desperate. And that was what terrified me the most. I kept my breathing even. My face relaxed. My body loose. I forced my fingers to stay still, my jaw not to clench, my pulse not to betray me. I played dead. And I prayed he believed it. I don't know how long he stood there. Maybe seconds. Maybe minutes. Time stopped making sense. Every part of me was waiting for him to move, to act, to do something. But he didn't. He just stayed there, a presence in the dark, watching me. And then, he reached out. His fingers ghosted over my cheek. Just a feather-light touch. Not aggressive. Not forceful. Just testing. Feeling. Like he was making sure I was real. I wanted to recoil. I wanted to turn my head, to shake him off. But I didn't. Because that would mean I lost. That would mean he won. He exhaled, a slow, satisfied sound. And then, he stepped back. The warmth of him disappeared. The air shifted. And then, just as suddenly as he had come, he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him. The silence swallowed the room whole. I didn't move. Not for a long time. Not until I was sure I was alone. Not until my body screamed at me that I could. And then, finally, I let the air leave my lungs, let my muscles unclench, let the fear settle deep into my bones. I had gotten away with it before. But not this time. This time, I had made a mistake. A mistake I wasn't sure I could take back. And I knew, deep down, he wasn't done with me yet. I don't know how long I lay there. 5 minutes? 10? It felt like hours. My body ached from the tension, my muscles locked so tight I thought I might snap in half if I moved too fast. But I couldn't stay there. I couldn't stay in that bed, in that room, trapped in the silence he had left behind. He was gone, but the weight of him still lingered, thick in the air, pressing against my skin like a bruise. I had to go. Now. But how? If I got up too fast, if I rushed, if I made a sound, what if he was still outside the door? What if he was waiting? What if this was still part of his game? Then, I had an idea. It was reckless. Desperate. But it was the only way I could think to get out of this alive. I didn't have time to overthink it. I just did it. I gasped, loud, sharp, like someone waking up from a deep sleep. My body jerked, my hands flew to my chest, my breath ragged, uneven. I made my voice small, weak, dazed. Where am I? I heard it. The hesitation. The sharp intake of breath. He flinched. Jordan hadn't expected that. He thought I would stay still. Stay quiet. Stay trapped. But I had flipped the script on him, turned the game on its head before he had a chance to react. I didn't wait. I moved before I could think, before the fear could grab hold of me again. My feet hit the floor hard, my legs unsteady, weak from how long I had stayed frozen. But I didn't stop. I shoved off the bed, stumbled forward, hands reaching blindly for the door. Behind me, I heard him move. A shift in weight. A sharp exhale. He was reacting now, catching up, realizing what I was doing. But I was faster. The second my fingers wrapped around the handle, I yanked it open. Light from the hallway flooded the room, too bright, too sharp. My eyes barely had time to adjust, but I didn't care. I ran. Barefoot. Breathless. My heart hammering so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. The hallway stretched long and empty in front of me. The patterned carpet blurred beneath my feet as I pushed forward, faster, faster. Behind me, I expected to hear him coming after me. Footsteps pounding, hands reaching. But there was nothing. Just silence. Just me, running alone through a place that suddenly felt too big, too empty, too unfamiliar. I made it out. But I wasn't safe yet. When I finally stopped running, I found myself in the hotel lobby, my breath still coming in sharp, painful bursts. The night manager was behind the desk, looking up at me, startled. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? I couldn't tell them what I had been doing, what I had let happen. I couldn't explain that I had built the trap and then fallen into it myself. I wanted to say something. Ask for help. But all I did was walk past him, out into the cold night air, barefoot, shivering, adrenaline still pumping through my veins like poison. The next morning, I went to the police. I sat in a stiff chair under fluorescent lights, telling them half-truths, giving them just enough information to make sense of why I was there without exposing everything. I wanted them to fix it. To undo it. To make what happened disappear. But when I told them about Jordan Waller, about the hotel, about the night I barely made it out of, they looked at me differently. Did you say no? That was the first question. Not about him. Not about what he did. But about me. About what I allowed. About what I had given consent to. The truth was, I had said yes. I had recorded the video. I had given the key. I had built the stage, set the scene, invited the actors, and played my part. And now, sitting in that tiny office with two officers glancing at each other like they already knew how this was going to end, I realized something. I had no one to blame but myself. I walked out without filing a report. It wouldn't have mattered anyway. Jordan Waller wasn't just a stranger. He was a reminder. A punishment. A mirror, showing me exactly what I had let myself become. And then, there was Nehemiah. I didn't tell him. I didn't have to. He already knew. It wasn't the hotel charges or the late nights or the way I had started pulling away from him long before any of this happened. It was something in my eyes. Something in my silence. He just knew. He asked me once, standing in the kitchen, his hands flat on the counter, his voice tired, empty. Was it worth it? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. He left that night. Packed a bag, didn't look back. And I let him go. Because there was nothing left to fight for. Some choices don't have clean endings. Some mistakes don't come with do-overs. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. I sit in a small cafe now, alone, staring at my phone. The dating apps are still there, sitting on my screen like old habits I haven't quite let go of. My fingers hover over them. My body itches for the routine. The thrill. The control. But then, something shifts. I press down. Hold. Delete. It's not freedom. It's not redemption. But it's something. As I put my phone down, I feel a presence nearby. A man at another table. He's looking at me. Just a glance. Just a moment. Old habits die hard. But some doors should never be opened. What do you think? Was I looking for control, or a way to destroy myself? Was I chasing danger, or was I just running from something else? And if you were in my shoes, would you have stopped before it was too late? Leave a comment. Tell me, where do you think the line is between control and chaos? Between freedom and self-destruction? And if this story made you think, made you feel something, made you question anything at all, Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Because sometimes, the hardest thing isn't walking away. It's knowing when you should have never walked in.